The mistake a lot of product managers make is they want everyone around them to be happy with them. Your reputation matters more than your message in most cases. And when you don't have that reputation, you gotta be willing to leverage the reputation of other people that are around you. Most of the decisions around your career happen with you not in the room. You gotta build advocates that showcase that the work you're doing is top-notch. When I talk about communication, it really comes down to, are you leaving people with an impression of you being in command of the situation, even if you don't know the answers? Your psychology matters as much as your strategy. You gotta own the identity of the person who's at the level that you want to get to right now. The courage to have open-ended conversations on what's important for them is what...
Shobhit, thanks for being here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Aakash.
If you haven't seen Shobhit online, he started his career in technology in 2002. He worked at McKinsey and spent 4 years as a PM at Google. Now he runs the Intentional Product Manager and has coached over 1,000 PMs. In today's episode, we're going to cover mindset shifts, career growth in product management, and Shobhit's hottest takes on leadership and ownership in product management. You mentioned before that product managers often focus too much on doing and not enough on building a reputation for something. If you had to choose just one thing to be known for as a product manager, what would it be?
Me personally, I had this. I used to be known as the person where you can put me in a very ambiguous situation, especially 0 to 1 initiatives, and I will make sense out of that. That was my specialty. And while I was at Google, I was interviewing for a couple of other roles, and all of them were much more senior level because I was able to use this unique angle of mastery, which is get me started with something brand new. I'll figure it out what your MVP should be and beyond.
The angle of mastery concept is one of the things I've heard you refer to over and over again. What are the different types of angles of mastery a PM can have?
Excellent question. So typically people think of angle of mastery in terms of I'm a healthcare PM, I'm a cloud PM, something like that, very much domain knowledge. But you can actually be very thoughtful and intentional and creative about it. So you can come up with a particular stage of product that you're really good at. You can come up with a particular stage of company and you've seen those challenges you can tackle very well. You can do a certain domain. You can even do application of certain technology. So you're seeing a lot of AI product managers, and even I think you've written an article on subspecialties within AI, leveraging that. So there's many different ways of looking at it.
So is the rule of thumb that in the bigger the market, the more narrow your specialty can be, and in the smaller the market, the more sort of broad it should be?
That is correct. But then there's also career stage, I think, which is a big determinant of that. So the later you are in your career, the narrower you would want your specialty to be. And then it's up to you to create that thread. I mean, I'll just give you a real life example that will help. One of the people we were working with, his was like, hey, I'm an accomplished product leader in the B2B and B2C space with 15 years of experience, etc., etc. Very generic. Looked at it, analyzed everything, we figured out, here's the angle of mastery. If you're a company with a product market fit, with at least one product that has product market fit, I'm a specialist in helping it grow from $1 million to $10 million in revenue to $100 million in the SaaS space. I just have built that angle of mastery with 5 different companies. So much more powerful, so much more appealing than the generic product leader with X years of experience.
This episode is brought to you by Interpret. Interpret unifies all your customer interactions, from Gong calls to Zendesk tickets to Twitter threads and App Store reviews, making them available for comprehensive analysis. As we've profiled in the newsletter, it's the trusted choice of product organizations like Canva, Notion, and Descript. They rely on Interpret to drive forward their voice of customer programs. What makes Interpret special is its ability to, one, build customer-specific AI models that provide more accurate categorization. Two, connect customer feedback directly to revenue impact so you can prioritize confidently. And three, uncover insights with their Wisdom AI Copilot so you have an intuitive chat interface to access your data. So if you want a custom model built for your organization, get in touch with the team at interpret.com/product growth. That's ENTERPRET.com/product growth. This episode is brought to you by Sprig. What if product teams knew exactly what to build to reach their goals? From increasing conversion to boosting engagement, these challenges require a deep understanding of your users, something we can't get from product analytics alone. Meet Sprig, a product experience platform that generates AI-powered opportunities to continuously improve your product at scale. First, Sprig captures your product experience in real time through heat maps, replays, surveys, and feedback studies. Then, Sprig's industry-leading AI instantly analyzes all of your product experience data to generate real-time insights. Sprig AI goes even further with actionable product recommendations to drive revenue, retention, and user satisfaction. Join product teams at Figma and Notion by uncovering AI-powered product opportunities at scale. Visit sprig.com/product-growth-podcast to book a demo and get a $75 gift card. 100%. So when you coach people on the angle of mastery, what is the fine line between choosing something you're truly an expert in and something you want to be an expert in? How much experience do you need to say, okay, I'm a master of this, or pitch yourself in a specific area?
Our rule of thumb is, people often look at it in terms of job descriptions and where they meet it. So we're saying, if you meet 50%, you should give it a shot. If you meet 70%, you're probably going to be one of the stronger candidates, especially when you look at the top few, because those are just wish lists rather than lists of requirements, and that's how you must treat them. That's roughly rule of thumb.
Okay. Awesome. I love the angle of mastery concept. Another one of your concepts that you have out there is this idea from going from good soldier to going to good general. What's one moment from your own career where you realized you were stuck as a soldier, and how did you flip that switch?
Yeah, you're going to make me live through some of the painful moments of my career. So this was right around the holidays where we were having a performance review cycle going on. And I'd finished my first year at this company. And the general feedback I got was, look, given all these different things, you executed on a whole bunch of different things. We saw a lot of movement, but we didn't see it go in one direction. And in particular, you didn't lead everyone and bring them behind something. So that was the idea, good soldier, you're given something, you execute it, you do really well, but you're not a good leader, a good general, and you didn't exhibit that. And the holidays sucked. All the time, this was just going on in my head. What do I do? And then I did turn it around next year. And that's when some of these concepts around angle of mastery started to come to me. Next year, what I had to go was let go of solving all the problems that existed with the company. So a lot of product managers I work with, they're problem solvers at heart, right? You're a problem solver, I'm a problem solver, and given a problem, we'll have to go solve it. Problem is, you can only do it with one or two areas. Really, if you ever listen to Alex Hermosi, whose podcast I'm a big fan of, he talks about when you think of hard work, people underestimate what hard work means, which means you can only do hard work behind one or two things, maybe three things. And so for me, it was about what are the levers that will move the company forward. I should be willing to focus only on those, and I should be okay with the 50 other problems that exist in the company, which everybody around you is going to remind you, right? Because it's a top problem for them. They're consistently going to be after you, why isn't that problem solved? And you got to be the person who's like, yeah, I'm okay with that. Let's keep going. And that's when I could put the effort to bring people around it and then become a good general. Let's do these three things, forget about everything else, even if you don't agree. That was
Yeah, what I tend to find with product managers is they historically have the personality where in high school and in college, they were able to simply outwork other people. And so they think as a hard worker, I can outwork other people. I can take on so many big features. But the fact of the matter is, like, in your job, even if you're putting in 50, 60 hours, if you put that into 17 things, it's not going to be as effective as if you put it into 3 game-changing things.
You know, I feel as an entrepreneur, it gets even worse. And one of my students now working on like very early stage startup, and he says, this is the worst prioritization exercise, toughest prioritization exercise I've ever done in my life. It gets harder.
It never gets easier. And as you move up as a product leader into better companies, places like Google or in VP level positions, the demands on your time actually increase.
Yep. I agree. 100%.
So let's say I'm a PM at a mid-level company. What's the fastest way to go from invisible to indispensable?
So here's the interesting thing. You could be both at the same time. You could be indispensable because you're working on the problem that's core to the business, but it's just not, something that's top of mind for them. They sort of ignored it over time. So in my opinion, this is a question of visibility, of making sure people understand why it's so critical, but then you do have to move to the right things. So we work through a concept which we call the career flywheel. And the idea behind it is that most of the decisions around your career happen with you not in the room, right? Like who's going to get the promotion, who's going to get the awesome project to work on that everybody wants to work on. So you got to build advocates that showcase that the work you're doing is top notch. Then they have to advocate for you. So you get certain opportunities that you can leverage to grow and become visible. And at the same time, you got to leverage those opportunities to build up the skill sets that will help you land the next opportunity. So it's very much the Amazon flywheel concept applied to careers. As long as you're on the forward momentum side of things, and you can get there no matter how bad the situation is. People are generally, they see a path forward, but they're in the negative cycle where they don't get any awesome opportunities because they're just not known. And then they're not building even the skill sets that will help you land those opportunities. They're in a reverse cycle. So it's just a matter of which part of the cycle you're in. Growth will come, might take longer, might be quicker at some companies.
You talk a lot about PMs needing to shift their mindset. What's the most underrated mindset shift that PMs need to make but don't realize soon enough?
The biggest one is actually letting go. It ties back to that general aspect. So, and this comes at many levels, but at a higher level, can you let go the need of solving every single problem? That's where it begins. But when you look at it day to day, the mistake a lot of product managers make is they want everyone around them to be happy with them. And when they do that, basically your product is a muddle. It's a muddle of feature requests from customers, demands from everybody, from stakeholders, and your roadmap is absolutely not clear. Now, if you didn't have that need, you let go of that need of people being happy with you all the time. Now you can actually have the clarity and the courage to have a really well-defined roadmap that's going to get everyone happy in the long term. But short term, that's not happy. So letting go of the need of people being happy all the time, letting go of short term arguments and everything, and just like kind of switching into the next interaction, the next thing that you're going to work on. That is one of the things that's highly underrated. And like I've built a process that people can transition in 30 seconds, but most people don't do that. And I think that's very underrated as a mindset piece.
What's the process?
Oh, awesome. So the process that we go through is, number one, you can think of it whatever you have in your mind, you can let go on two different levels. One is more tactical, like I got to jump into a meeting, writing it down helps me let go. But then there's the whole science of tapping, as well as the whole science of actually listening for where you're feeling certain emotions in your body. That's a longer term thing that might take a few minutes. That, especially when end of day or some is something where that's very useful. But then, as important, while you let go these things, is to define your best self. And I use a frame around three words that, okay, if I, for example, me coming into this podcast, how do I want to show up? I want to show up excited. I want to show up as intentional and then something else. Cool. For 30 seconds, I let that ruminate in my mind, just like thinking through that. And then we jumped into this interaction. So that sets up the frame for your next visit. That is a process that we follow all the time.
So do you couple this with a lot of time blocking in order to kind of enforce that you're working on the right things?
I would say yes. And you really got to know how to protect those time blocks. So most of the time, when people start with the time block concept, they end up failing because somebody's like, oh, time block, cool. The perfect time for me to set up a meeting with this. And, there is a very famous article by Paul Graham, Maker's Schedule, Manager's Schedule, where makers, like software engineers, they require a whole afternoon to work creatively on something. Managers, they can work in 15 to 30-minute increments. As a product manager, you're a bit of both. So your schedule should be manager time, maker time, and never shall both meet. However, the only way you can actually maintain your maker time without your manager time taking over is if you have enough defense mechanisms. So, for example, one of my favorite things used to be, oh, cool, I'm going to work on the roadmap or the strategy over the next 6 months. Cool. The first thing I would do is I would go to my manager and say, oh, I'm working on this. Can I give you a preview next Thursday? And she'll be like, okay, that sounds wonderful. Time scheduled. Now somebody comes and blocks that time. I'm like, I won't tell them I need to work on strategy because they'll be like, whatever, do it some other time. Now I'm like, I have time set up with my manager. I did this urgent presentation due for that, so I have to work on that. And now they're like, oh, I get it. Oh, yeah, of course. We'll find another time. Or we'll manage it without you. And like, that's the kind of stuff you have to do when you technically own your schedule, but you don't quite. So that's where time blocking really comes in and is helpful.
I love that. Do you have any other techniques and phrases and wordings we can use to really protect our time? Because the other one that comes up is Slack or Teams.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have an easy one there because the only way I managed was to, one, turn it off, and second, it was not on my phone. It's still not on my phone. My personality is such that if it is on my phone, it will be prioritized over my wife, my kids, everyone. Oh, I don't know how it. Those things are very critical. But another one actually that comes up is fake deadlines imposed by other people, where they're like, "Oh, everybody needs to fill out this thing, especially in a large organization, by this Friday," and so you have to really question those and figure out, okay, it's a deadline, so who's going to die if that doesn't happen by that time, or just what is going to go wrong. And like many times I did that, and this person was like, oh no, I just want to get something done by this time. Okay, cool. How about if I get it to you by this time because I have something else to do? Cool. So just keep negotiating your schedule and other people's requirements on you. Otherwise, a year would go by and you're going to be like, what really happened here?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to just get other people's requirements of you in the form of email, in the form of calendar invites, in the form of deadlines and Slack messages to consume 100% of what you do as a product manager.
Yeah. And it actually plays to like basic human psychology where we would, we are social animals and we would rather do something for someone else versus do it for ourselves. We're sort of a little selfless in that way, but that could hurt you because now you're just doing stuff for other people and then you suffer long term. So got to be a little bit, quote unquote, selfish here.
And you've said decisiveness amid ambiguity is one of the pillars of a great product manager. What's a real world example where you made a tough call as a PM, and how did that decision affect your career?
Yeah. So some of the toughest calls I've had to make there is to kill products, is to just like shut down things. So I'll give you two examples. One was the first product I owned at Google. It came in via an acquisition. And ultimately, after a bunch of analysis, I made the call to that, hey, with Google Analytics already in the company, this product does not have a future. So now it's all about how do we get customers to migrate successfully and still have a good experience. And the team was like really broad and like they had put in like years of work behind it. It was a much loved product. But ultimately, that had to be sunset. So that's an example of making a very tough call under ambiguity. Another one was I joined a new team after that, and they had a team of 6 people, 7 different initiatives. And the interesting things in this case was that it was a very different kind of tough call because it was not so much that everybody wanted all those initiatives to continue, but they had what is referred to as Abilene paradox. So the idea behind it is that there's many people sitting on a train. Many people are planning a trip, and they decide to go on a trip to this place called Abilene. And if you ask them individually where you want to go, they would say, "Oh, not Abilene, but I think this person wants to go there," and they will be hurt if we didn't go. And so they end up going to Abilene while individually no one had to go. In this case, like cutting the initiatives was very much a conversation with a bunch of folks, understanding that really they didn't want it to continue. But somebody had to have the courage to have those individual conversations and narrow down to 2 particular things. That was another tough call. Another one, and maybe you should use just one of these or 2 of these. So another one was actually making a call that we had absolutely, so at a startup, reached the limit of our current tech stack, and the only way forward was to rewrite the whole product, completely kill it. And 90% of those rewrites completely fail. But this was a call of, hey, we got to build a new stack. We got to migrate everyone over because of ABC it will offer. And imagine convincing 30 engineers who would again spend 3 years of their life being like, cool, let's redo this whole thing and get them excited about the new technology, get them really going behind it.
Can you double click on that first story actually? Because I think a lot of people lack the gumption to kill a product. What gave you the conviction and how did you communicate the message?
What ultimately gave me conviction was deep customer analysis and understanding that there are people who are just like absolutely fans of this product. But when you look at the entire base, 80-90% of those mapping their needs could be met by the existing product of Google Analytics. So that was a big thing. But then also combining with the business side of things. So how does Google at the end of it make money from this? Not direct revenue, because a lot of things in Google don't drive direct revenue. But at the end of it, these become loyal customers who would then use other products. The path was through Google Analytics. So explaining the context of the decisions from a business perspective and taking it away from the short-term pain that a few customers would face was ultimately what drove it there. And then, of course, like anything in influence, it's basically a social exercise. So rather than me trying to convince 100 people, I could convince 3, and they could in turn rally their teams and convince other people. So it was a lot about finding who are the people who are slightly aligned to me at first, but then also have a broad reputation, given I was new to this group. So they have existing reputations that can be used. And, that was one of the biggest lessons, that in influence, your reputation matters more than your message in most cases. And when you don't have that reputation, you got to be willing to leverage the reputation of other people that are around you. Absolutely critical lesson, and it helped me convince it. Took some time.
Did you have like some sense that you'd be like moved into another PM product? Because I think in big companies, what a lot of people are worried about is like, I'm going to have to go through some team match process again just to have another job. And I'm going to have the whole ramp up period that's associated with the new job, which means, questionable whether you're going to build up trust with your tech lead and your design partner and your manager, questionable if all the execs are going to like the direction you're taking things. So it's a risk usually to kind of kill your own job.
Yeah. Truth be told, I was scared. I was like, what's going to happen? This is my first product and I'm saying, let's get rid of it. But luckily I had a supportive team around me. And I think the best part of my journey at Google was being in the particular group that I was in. As you know, these large companies, they're really more like countries and less like companies. There's so much variation. But I was confident of this group's culture. They look out for people, they have high standards, but at the same time, there was a lot of career planning with my manager. So my manager showed me, look, there's all these opportunities. We can always figure out a way forward. Don't worry about that. Worry about the customers. Worry about what can happen. And then I knew there were some other bigger products that I ultimately went to that, I kept bringing up as part of this. So, that's where the career canvas or the career flywheel idea really originated. Was even going through this, I was demonstrating my skill sets of being able to make strategic decisions under a lot of pressure, under a lot of emotion. And then how do I have enough people looking out for opportunities for me such that I can grow despite my contribution being to shut down a product while providing customers a great experience on them moving to the other product. That was just as big a part of that. So that's how I thought about it. But I was scared.
Does Google kill too many products, or is it a good thing that they do that?
That's a tough question. I have seen being removed from other products and looking at it from an external perspective. I've certainly felt that should not have been killed. Like FeedBurner, Reader, Google Reader were like some of those things that were very well loved. But from an external perspective, it definitely feels like Google kills a lot of products. But I think they do have the culture of let's launch a lot of things and then we'll figure out what works long term. Google Domains is another one that they've sold that to Squarespace, so that there's a path out. But I do think Google does care about a migration path if a product is killed. And that's the best thing you can ask for in that case. So I think they work pretty hard to do that.
Okay. Back to product management, you emphasize taking full ownership of outcomes as a PM. How do you coach someone to develop this kind of extreme ownership mindset without feeling overwhelmed by responsibility?
You can have extreme ownership over everything, but you don't need to act on it. I'm a strong believer and strong follower of Sadhguru or Isha Foundation. And one of the concepts they emphasize is you can be responsible for everything without needing to act on it. Because you can be responsible for everything, you can have different circles. So we call circle of concern, which is awesome. If I was a CEO, these are all the things I would work on. Then you have a circle of control. And then beyond that, there's a circle of influence. Circle of control is what can I do in my team? Circle of influence is what I can influence. So what you need to then narrow down and focus on is that circle of control and a little bit on circle of influence, knowing that as long as you also not just do the work, but sell the value of the work, your circle of control and influence will both expand. So you can address everything on a long enough time horizon. As long as you know that, you can take extreme ownership, but you don't have to solve everything right now. That's how I encourage people to think about this whole concept.
Okay. So one of the things you focus quite a bit on is PMs increasing their earning potential. Some PMs, you've increased their income by 50%. What's the single biggest mistake you see people make when it comes to negotiating their worth as a PM or product leader?
Yeah. You have to understand the market, and you have to recognize that there's a wide rift between some of the top companies that just pay very, very good amount of money versus somebody who's just, a non-tech company, traditional, just starting to bring on product managers, and most of the product managers are doing more program or project management or execution sort of work right now. So finding your right place in the market, also finding back to the concept of your angle of mastery, who's going to be willing to pay a premium for it. I think, where are you an expert? That's a big part of it. So right company, right expertise where they would up level you. Then just like some of the basics you have to do really well, where if you totally killed it at the interviews, you could move up a level. Like we had a case where somebody did really well. Company came back and said, okay, we're willing to give you an offer. And they're like, awesome. This is my desired compensation. Good negotiation. They're like, I believe it's competitive. I've done this research. And the company was like, awesome. Let's up level you. Let's move you up from senior product manager to director. And so we can give you this compensation pretty easily. So knowing what your worth is and being also willing to have those uncomfortable conversations. I just got an email this morning where this person went to one of the well-known fintech companies, and he was saying that, hey, one of the things that I was most scared of, but you all made me do, was to go back and ask for 100K more than what the company had offered me. And literally the company just met this person's needs and up-leveled them because all the other things worked together. They had the unique angle of mastery. They had communicated that really well. The company was really bought into their potential, onto this person's potential for them. And then they were able to negotiate that premium. So all four of these factors play well together to help you up-level.
Say more on the negotiation process. How should a typical PM approach it? When do they start talking numbers? When do they not start talking numbers? When do they say the first to state numbers versus the company to state numbers first? And what are the right leverage points to increase your number?
Yeah. Okay. One of the best things that's happened is you do get some rough compensation ranges. Now, it's not always very helpful. Like Netflix is well known for putting a pay range between 100K and 700K. Okay, amazing. But most of the times, at least for larger companies, what you can do is you can see, based on the pay ranges and years of experience, you can map it to a particular level or a set of levels. As long as that's what you're targeting, we defer compensation discussions all the way till the end, or we try to. Then if you've done a really good job of these things, then you can really start to negotiate. But even then, we prefer to have, let me put it this way. If we believe that the company is going to make a good offer, but maybe not great yet, I would rather them make a good offer first and then negotiate. If we have a chance that they're not going to come up with a good offer, we would love to anchor and sort of find a pathway through. But a general point that we try to drive is get them to love you first. Forget about compensation. You can always figure out the right level. Except if it's a company where you feel it's never even going to get close and there you want to shut down the process early. You don't want to waste a lot of time beyond that. That's how we generally approach negotiations. And then you're knowing what your worth is, which we look a lot of our data, external data to figure that out. I think that's a big determinant of your ability to succeed there, along with just the courage to go and ask for what seems like a ridiculous number if they have anchored you low.
What is your favorite data sources for finding your worth, and do you share your prior salary?
No prior salary needed unless it was actually better and you could leverage that. I use levels.fyi quite a bit, But then we have our own internal data that we've captured with all these different offers that we've negotiated. So we use a combination of both.
Okay. You built a successful PM coaching business after leaving a stable job at Google. What mindset shift helped you break away from the corporate path and build something on your own?
So I always wanted to do something on my own. I just never knew I would be doing coaching as my entrepreneurial venture. But the first thing I did was, Akash, I launched a free class. And my only criteria for a free class was you need to apply for it. I'll select 10 out of 40 people. I ended up selecting 8 out of 40 people that applied. And then 7 was still present till the last class. So I knew there was like some fit going on because often people don't tend to value free stuff. And that not happened. Then after that, for me, really, this was a very lean startup approach. I had a hypothesis, test it out, go from there. And I really, people say it's a very courageous decision and you did all these things, but I actually minimize my risk. I believe this is a false assumption that entrepreneurs take massive risks and they just go for it. Actually, really good entrepreneurs often just take very well calculated risks. They know where they have a unique advantage, they go after that. So that's my calculated risk was I'm going to run this company while working at Google. I'm going to work double time until I feel that, hey, me as a sole earner for my family, I can provide the same level for my family very close to when I leave. So for me, it was like building up, understanding everything, learning from the best on how do I set up marketing for this? What's the actual program that's going to work? What are the areas where people need help? That's what helped me ultimately to go launch my own business. But it was a 2-year journey. It's not like I jumped in and didn't know what I was doing. I believe that's a myth in most cases.
Okay, so you worked double time for 2 years. You got your salary almost to Google salary, which is pretty high. Are you willing to share? Have you been able to exceed that? How has it gone since then?
Yeah, now it's exceeded that many times over. So it has only scaled, but scaling in entrepreneurship does not look like this. Scaling looks like this. So, like there's been many dips and many highs. And then I'm like, sometimes 6 months after the high, I'm still trying to recreate what led to that and like reverse engineer everything. So I believe the upside on having your own company is just huge. Nothing beats that upside and nothing beats the instant results you can get. Like I don't have to convince anyone. Maybe like my co-founder in one of my programs, I need to convince him, but I can just go and test it out. But it's willingness to live through the dips, live through that stress, and know that you could have months, and I still have months, despite having scaled so much, where I'm like, oh, awesome. That was a loss. Financially, that month was a loss. But okay, like the year was good. And you can think in terms of days and everything in a predictable paycheck. You have to be willing to live through that and make tough decisions where needed. So that's how I looked at this whole thing.
Got it. And are you able to share like the percentages? Where does your revenue come from? What does that pie chart look like for folks?
For me, I would say it's 80% focused on the one core program we have, which is called Intentional Job Search. And then 20% from like our mastermind and continued coaching programs. But Intentional Job Search has many levels. Intentional Job Search, executive job search that's more focused on, let's say, L7 plus roles at a Google or something like that. That's what we are most well known for. And that's where most of our revenue is focused. And then,
what are the growth channels that have worked best for you? Did I see you on paid ads in Meta?
oh, yeah. The joke is Google used to pay me. Now I pay Google because Facebook and Google and YouTube ads are huge, as is LinkedIn as a channel. I think those are my primary channels. And now increasingly my YouTube channel and podcast coming up. Those are some of the the biggest things. But I love ads because it's very much, it's as long as you have the rest of the pipeline well focused, well, okay, cool, spend more on ads. Yeah, there's going to be like ups and downs, but still it's a way to get in front of people who you just won't get in front of, and then you can control, you can like spend more and get more people interested to a certain point and then grow. So yeah, those have been my growth channels.
I feel like anyone who does well with ads, they have to love them. They have to love coming up with clever little, hacks where the CPM is low, but they can convert the users, or the CPC is low. What are like 2 or 3 of those that you stumbled upon that you're like, this is great? I mean, you can even choose ones that no longer work so that nobody competes with you.
So interestingly, I don't run my own ads. I have an agency that does that. But the things I am obsessed with is the creative. And it feels to me that as Facebook and Google are going to a place of where there's going to be less and less targeting data that you can use, they are trying to go more towards user privacy and regulation and all these things. It's your creators that is going to matter. Like, do people know very quickly who that is this ad for me? What am I going to get out of this? Is it interesting? And you got to like moment by moment hook them, just like with a product, you need to do that. And then the one mistake I made for which I had like a eureka moment later was I was like, cool, these ads are doing fine. And I wasn't like testing new ones. And it's just, there's some formulas you can use, but in most cases, you just never know what's going to work. Like some of the best ads I had was me walking down a street, holding my phone like this. And for some reason, people really liked that versus me like sitting in a studio and doing it. I couldn't have predicted any of that. So it's just something that you need to be willing to test. And you need to be willing to spend some money to test and know that this whole thing might be a complete failure. But the aggregate works out. That to me is all about the hacks on ads. But I'm not the cutting edge on like CPC, CPM or anything like that.
Okay. So going back to our prioritization question, how much time a month do you spend on ad creative?
Actually not that much. Maybe a few hours.
Okay. So that gets it done.
Yeah, that gets it done. I would say okay. Ad creative is as much as inspiration as it's the actual execution. So if I get like a idea for something, like we got the idea for this thing called the silver medal syndrome, which is you given the competitive market, there's like so many product managers who are like number 2 or 3 in a job, and then they don't get it, and they're like going through it over and over again. And in fact, one of our clients, he ultimately ended up a director at a top company, and he had gone through being number 2 in like 7 different roles. And so then we had to like really fine tune things to help him get there. That's where the term came from. And then that translated to ads. So for me, sort of a lot of the work happens in the background where I'm listening to people, the conversations, the stuff that comes up in group coaching, and from there the ideas come. Then execution is actually not that hard. But that's where the real work happens, and it's sort of in the background.
Awesome. Thanks for those insights. Returning back to PM, in your experience coaching PMs, 1,000 plus now, what are the 2 most common patterns that hold people back from reaching the CPO or VP of product level?
Number 1 is at some point you can only do so much, and it's you building a team and growing leaders that is going to determine your ultimate success. So whether it's you're looking for a new job as a VP or CPO, you got to be able to communicate what makes you special as a coach of product managers, as somebody who's going to build a strong team culture. And then number 2 comes back to angle of mastery, which is what are the exact problems you anticipate this company or this product line is going to go through over the next 3 to 5 years, and where can you demonstrate you solve those problems. It goes back to from Clay Christensen. He wrote a book, How Will You Measure Your Life? And he basically coined this term of schools of experience, where I'm messing up the term, but the idea was like, have you lived through the experiences where you needed to solve the exact problems that this company is going to solve? If you can communicate that, you're golden. If you cannot, even if you're trying to get promoted or whatnot, you won't get there. I think those are the two biggest areas.
So what's clear then here is that you need to have a lot of influence, right? So when you are a PM at a fast-growing startup or a large organization, you're often not the most senior person in the room. What's your number one tip for building that influence?
Borrow it. Or I'll give you two tips because I can narrow down to one. Number one, borrow the influence. Influence a few people that can spread your message. Make sure your manager is bought in, because that you need that aspect significantly. But then be willing to facilitate influence. So people support their own ideas far more than they would support your idea. And if you can make them basically feel that they had a say in, not even, they don't have to come up with the idea, it could be yours, but they had a say in refining the idea, they're going to go to bat for you. And I think that's where people make this mistake of they come in and they're like, awesome, I have this wonderful idea. You listen to me. Awesome. You 20 minutes, you listen to me. While I encourage them to begin conversations very much like, oh, have you noticed this problem? But why do you think we're having this? Okay, well, have you noticed the implications? Okay, what should we do about it? I'll give you a real world example, not from product management world. So I had to convince my wife that it's okay that we sold our car and bought a Tesla instead. And so, the conversations over time pretty much went like, have you noticed a lot of electric vehicles now on the roads? Oh, I wonder what people like about them. Oh, which ones do you see the most often? Oh, Tesla. Oh, okay. You don't like Elon Musk. Yeah, I get it. But do you think, we could go just test it out, see how it goes? What's good about them? And then slowly she got bought in. Of course, there was a killer moment, just like as product fanboys, where what happened was we ended the test drive. It wasn't really smooth because I was getting used to the Tesla. But then we come up to the parking spot and it auto detects that I want to park and it says, do you want me to park for you? The auto park function. I just pressed start and I showed it to her and she's like, okay, we can get it. So that was a fanboy moment, but that was facilitating influence at play. I hope she's not listening right now, but that's what people should leverage.
This episode is brought to you by Adio, the next generation CRM. Imagine a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and actually intuitive. Adio makes that a reality. As I've profiled in the Product Growth newsletter, setting up Adio takes less than a minute, and within seconds of syncing your email and calendar, you'll see your relationships in one place, enriched with valuable data, including things like relationship strength. Adio lets you build Zapier-style automations, create powerful reports, and works for any go-to-market motion, from PLG to sales-led. Adio is designed for the next era of companies like yours. And companies like yours shouldn't have to deal with inflexible, one-size-fits-all CRMs. Join industry leaders like 11 Labs, Replicate, and Modal. Head to adio.com/productgrowth and you'll get 15% off your first year. That's attio.com/productgrowth. I'm going to send this to her. Okay, so communication matters, and you have this statement that I like, that PMs often fail because they don't focus on communication. So what's a framework or tactic that's worked for you to align teams around product decisions?
To me, when I talk about communication, it really comes down to, are you leaving people with an impression of you being in command of the situation, even if you don't know the answers? That is the fundamental premise behind all communication techniques that I show. So just as an example, like I've been inspired by a book, Great on the Job. And one of the frameworks is, hey, If somebody ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, which is, oh, what is our retention rate for this cohort or something, or what are the customers' core top problems? You can just say, oh, sorry, I don't know it. Okay, it doesn't leave a great impression. But you can instead change it and be like, okay, here's what I know. I know all these things. Here's what I don't know. Here's my plan to find out and when I'll get it to you. Seems like simple, but there's like 20 different tweaks in different situations that consistently give this brand of you being in control as a product manager and you're on top of things and you can be trusted. Once you establish that with all these tweaks, it's going to be golden. I would say even like some of your top presentation, you got to drive clarity and everything, but people emphasize the moments where people are presenting something big and that's all pivotal. But like a lot of the hard work of communication happens in these day-to-day situations that people miss out on. So I feel those are actually what drives a great brand for product managers.
I've noticed that a lot of times you don't get direct feedback on those day-to-day conversations because you might have answered 80% okay, but not 100% okay. So how do you get the right signals out from the world of whether you are nailing those day-to-day situations, and then how do you improve?
The only way I managed to do it was to be very clear on what I am looking to learn at a particular point in time or looking to grow at a particular point in time, and then tell my manager that, hey, right now my development focus is X. Can you let me know if you see something? And maybe some other trusted peers. I think that's the way. And then when I asked for it, I think Nikhil Singhal writes a lot about it, that getting feedback is hard and giving feedback is hard because nobody wants to upset you. You can tell them, I'm open to feedback, but that doesn't do much. But if you went and actually demonstrated and consistently asked for that feedback and consistently asked for feedback in areas that you want to grow in, that's when people will actually start to believe you. And that's how I managed to get feedback, and same coaching I provide to my students as well.
Okay, we touched a little bit on the tough times in PM, but I want to return to those because I think the most common criticism of product content is it's all survivorship bias. It's all of the stuff that went well. So I really want to get into the gory details of what you did wrong, and don't even bother right now telling us what you learned from it, but what's one product failure you had? And I just want to hear about how it went so people can really empathize with it in detail.
Oh, yeah, I remember this very well. So one big failure on a major product I managed was me sort of getting caught up in the fancy new stuff and not looking at basic things like speed of the page loading. I mean, we didn't even measure it. And after enough people spoke about it, I looked into it, and speed of one of the common pages that loaded was 8 seconds. 8 seconds. What is this dial-up internet from 2000? It was just not acceptable. So for me, that was one of the biggest failures because I know this about me. I love to be a big picture person and sort of the next idea and everything, but I do sometimes miss out on details. And that's not a detail that's one of those health metrics you gotta have your eye on as a product manager. So we found that a few people also moved away from the product and whatnot, and I had to do a lot of work and actually work around a lot of things to make sure we could deliver that well. And it wasn't a simple technical problem to solve because of where we were in tech stack perspectives.
How did you communicate the failure to your manager? Or did you just kind of own it? We messed this, it was my fault, or because one might also say typically a technical stat like page load time, yes, the PM is responsible, but especially at a company like Google, really the tech lead on that team is responsible for that metric.
You can say that, but at the end of it, it's your customer's experience that is getting affected, right? So I took 100% full ownership, and the tech lead also took 100% ownership. The ownership doesn't need to be divided. Cool. We're both taking 100% ownership. That's awesome. For me, it was um, really communicating that I made certain assumptions that were false, that I just assume would be taken care of. But there's just no way I should have made that decision. And here's how to fix it in the future. So, short term, like even my rating got impacted for that particular uh, cycle by a little bit, but that's okay. You learn and then you adjust going forward.
Okay. And you've also held several leadership roles. What's the hardest leadership lesson you've had to learn, and how has it shaped your philosophy on product management?
The hardest leadership lesson is this general or very delicate balance between giving complete ownership to the people that are on my team, but then also making sure they are set up for success and they're not going to make mistakes that I can predict. To me, that, like everyone's going to make mistakes. But if I could have predicted that that's going to happen and I didn't check in and ensure that without it feeling like that I'm not giving them ownership, I think that is one of the biggest mistakes that I made from leadership. So building a team, you got to have this balance of autonomy combined with accountability. And if you're not willing to as a leader, you would either be the leader that nobody wants to work for, who's too much of a micromanager, or the leader that people want to work for because they get freedom, but then ultimately their team doesn't perform. And that's what I've had to learn over time.
You've said certificates are useless. That's a pretty bold claim. Obviously, a lot of your competition, they're issuing certificates. That's their acquisition mechanism. Why are they useless?
They're useless because your hiring manager, just the people who are hiring you, they don't care about it. Do all the programs in the world to learn. No problem with that. You get to know what product managers do. You get as much practical experience, whatnot. Excellent. Don't do it with the assumption that now I have a certificate, so I will be eligible for any job. While at Google, I didn't see a single product manager with any sort of jobs, any sort of certificates associated with their profile. Yeah, and I consistently get this question that, hey, I do this. I got my certified Scrum product owner certificate. I would love your help in finding a job. And I'm like, no, but there's no experience that I can leverage. As the market is now moving to even more senior product managers, this is going to be even more important. So that's why I believe certificates are not really useful.
So you should prioritize experience, like as a PM. But if you can't get a PM job, what do you do? Do you go for MBA, Masters in Computer Science? What are the routes?
So MBA is a great path. If you product adjacent roles are a great path. So like some of the best ones that I've seen are UX, pre-sales engineering, certain types of customer success roles, technical lead roles, which are highly customer focused. See, ultimately, if you can break down the skill sets of a product manager and map the day-to-day what you're doing to that, that's another great one. Then I've seen some people just do on-the-side internships with companies, work with them. I have a student right now who's basically they're going through sprints and everything, and she's doing it all while working a full-time job and getting this awesome experience. Now that company might just hire her, or she might be able to leverage that for something new. And then last but not least, you can do side projects. I mean, especially now that you can leverage AI for a bunch of different things, the bar for you to be a programmer, it's not lower, but there are tools out there to help you. So you could do the entire cycle yourself and use that in addition to everything that you've done to move forward.
I haven't heard of the internship advice before. How does that work exactly? Do you commit to like basically just only having meetings and messaging them outside of 9 to 5?
It depends on the person's schedule. I've seen this person being like, cool, I have a very flexible schedule, so I'll make it work, whatever. Otherwise, one of the best hacks I've seen is people find it in a different time zone. West Coast, they find one on Eastern, and they just start early and get everything done. And I mean, they're getting paid very less, if anything at all, which means that now the company that they're doing the internship with is willing to be flexible. They're like, awesome, we get some good work out of you, and we just have to accommodate you in the morning. Yeah, that works. So I've seen that happen quite a few times now, and has helped people transition into product in very great ways.
So I imagine it's hard to get an internship at a big company. Are you targeting like smaller companies that you come up with the offer themselves? They might not even have an internship posted, but you say, hey, I might be willing to do this internship for you for minimal or free.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've helped post some of these, and very often the way these come out is somebody has especially discovery related work they want to get done on an idea they want to explore, but they haven't yet gotten around to it. So a lot of customer interactions, customer interviews, which I building out a roadmap, which is ultra valuable experience from a perspective of the person who's there. But it's also a function of really what are the skill sets they're trying to gain by doing this. So like somebody who's highly strategic, they might actually want some experience working with engineers and like building the product and the execution side of things. While somebody else, the customer side might be more important. So it's just dependent on what skill set you're looking to fill in.
Okay, so you should kind of round out your PM profile if you're PM adjacent. If you're not technical, try to get more technical stuff, etc.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. You've helped a lot of PMs land their dream jobs. What's the biggest resume mistakes you typically coach people on, and how should they better structure their resumes for impact?
So there's 3 big mistakes that people make in their resumes. So first, is it the right level? Depending on what level you're targeting, the kind of skill sets and impact you want to demonstrate are different. Just as an example, you saying, I launched this product, it brought in $10 million of additional revenue, might be awesome. But if you're going for a highly strategic role, you got to actually showcase coming up with the concept, doing the research, convincing a whole bunch of people, and then launching it rather than just launching it. So that's the right level. The second is the context of the impact. $10 million of revenue might be awesome for a startup who had $20 million. You got a 50% increase. If you're at Google, no one's going to care at all at Google scale. So what it means from a company. And then last but not least, this one's really hard. It's to showcase the story where you make it clear, why was this such a difficult problem for you to tackle? What was so unique about the approach that you use? A lot of resumes look the same. Launched e-commerce, did that. Well, there's been a million e-commerce products. What was the unique challenges that you solved here? Those are 3 things that I think are very important in resumes.
Should PMs include side projects on their resume?
Yeah, side projects are absolutely fine, but you got to be selective. So I had a product manager who had 4 side projects, and it was like, your target is FANG companies. They have, or his target was like FANG Plus, and so they're probably not going to care about these given the scale of these. But if you could showcase one where you had unique insights that you understood of a market, maybe just include that one side project. So you have to be very, very intentional about it, about which ones you include. Again, rounding out the skill set profile. And then it kind of like it adds that level of personality. It could add that level of personalities. For example, this person, all-time fintech PM, working on trust and safety. Startup, worked on handbag company. Oh, okay, something interesting comes in. Like, you're probably going to have conversation about it. And that's actually one of the hidden uses of the resume. It's not that it gets you the interview, that it also drives the conversation in the interview. So if you have something fun, something interesting, the interview is going to go towards that.
A couple other things that people often ask about resumes: the summary section up top, should they have it? A skills section at the bottom, should they have it? And designed, should it be designed outside of a normal template? And should it be one page? What are your takes on those?
Definitely have a summary section. Be clear about what you are looking for, along with your what you bring to the table. It's very much like when you see an ad on the internet, you're like, "Is this for me?" That's your first question. You want to answer that. Is this for the hiring manager? Uh, Skill section, I think it's kind of wasteful, waste of space. Um, it does not have to be one page. I believe up till 2 pages is fine. But the rule of thumb is if you have less than 10 years of experience, you probably are okay with one. But again, it depends on useful experience versus not relevant experience. Oh, design, absolutely not. Find a template that works with ATS systems. Because even like when I post jobs, like I'm looking at it from ATS parsing it. And so all I care about is the words, easy to read, and it actually shows up right. Design just takes away from it. Do not have it designed.
All right, moving on from the resume, what's your strategy for getting noticed by recruiters or hiring managers when applying?
This is one of the counterintuitive things where people think that the magic is in the resume, and the magic is working through the ATS while you want to work around the ATS. So even in this market, a direct outreach to recruiters and hiring managers seems to be the number one conversion tactic. And the second one is combination of referrals and somebody literally emailing the hiring manager and saying, "This person's awesome, please do interview them." Those are the things that work. In the direct outreach, we teach a lot of different things, like how you craft the message, it really matters, how you do follow-ups. But we're even moving away from um, just those messaging and trying to use like more techniques that you might learn in sales and marketing. So like sometimes we have people record a loom about that intrigues the hiring manager. Typically they're gonna open a loom link if you send it, just because it's different. So we just call it, you introduce a certain amount of intrigue into that engages them, just like how ads would engage you, leading to the landing page and everything. Yeah, applying a lot of the principles into getting the outsized return.
Okay. And you mentioned the content of how you craft those cold messages is really important. What is a bad cold message versus a good one?
Um, a bad cold message is, "I'm very interested in this role. Here is my resume." A great cold message is something includes a few elements, something that connects immediately with the hiring manager, or something could be like very personal, a very clear statement why you might be a good fit, and then a really strong, intriguing call to action, which is not just like, "Hey, please refer me." It could be a conversation. It could be, "Learn more about me here." It's just something that's a little bit different from what everyone else is doing. You got to very much think of it from like, this is your headline, this is the landing page copy, here's the call to action. How do you make it all different? And then now you have the chances of making it a video, making it whatever you want to really help you succeed.
Where do you reach out to people? How do you decide who to reach out to?
There are, I mean, we try to optimize for hiring managers and recruiters. It's not obvious where the hiring manager is. That's where having some sort of contact in the company really helps, if you're focused on that. But we've seen just enough success of um, pre-interviewing or informational interviewing, where rather than it being for a specific role, you're just interested in a company, you build a connection with somebody who later can refer you. So this is often the longer game. And this is one of the coaching I help people get when they're not in active job search. Interestingly, it's like you're building your network now for the job search that might come. You kind of already know what your top companies are uh, much earlier than you actually start looking for a job. So that's why we actually change up tactics when you're like, "I need a job now," versus, "I need a job from 6 months to a year from now." And then I mean, of course, recruiters are key. We tend to focus more on company recruiters, but increasingly so looking at outside recruiters as well.
And do you reach them over email, LinkedIn?
Email and LinkedIn sounds great, but there is a concept called Dream 100, which is that is for the longer term network building. Where cool, what would be your top 100 people that you want to connect with? Awesome. Well, every week you follow their post, you comment on post, you become a familiar face for them before you connect with them. That's another tactic that works wonderfully, but it has a longer time to value. But the value is huge. The value at the end of the day is huge.
How do you suggest candidates prepare for PM interviews, especially in highly competitive companies like Google or Amazon?
My biggest advice here is don't obsess about the framework. Pick one framework that works for you. Where you need to really focus on is within the framework. Are you getting insights at the right level? So let's say, it's a product design or product sense interview. Can you come up with unique segments, unique problems, and can you get someone to give you feedback? I know this might be self-serving, but someone to give you feedback to make sure you're at that right level and then can teach you what would just a strong higher answer look like. And as long as you're willing to go through that loop many, many, many times, that's where success is. And then it's just, essentially you're trying to get to a level of competence that is very much unconscious competence. So you don't need to think about the framework. Like now, if I do a product design question, I just like go for it. And people are like, they are actually sometimes confused, some of my students, because it's like, you didn't follow the framework. I'm like, yeah, no, I don't need to do all those things exactly. But the other thing that people miss is they focus too much on product design, metrics questions. They miss out on behavioral because there's a false assumption that behavioral questions are easy. It's really hard to tell a compelling story, be concise, have the interviewer follow along for you to do well. So you to be able to have certain set of core narrative, for you to be able to use that in different situations. And you know what you're optimizing for at the end of the day? Two things. The feeling that the interviewer leaves with and the notes that they leave with. So you gotta almost make sure they're taking good notes. You're reverse engineering this entire process. So that's why behavioral interviews in my mind tend to be like actually more challenging than product design.
Yeah, I recently profiled 5 PMs who got jobs in the market in the last 2 months, and all 5 of them said, don't underrate your behavioral prep. Because when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, first of all, every interview, including your case interviews, are going to have some behavioral, right? And second of all, when you sum it all up and you look at the questions, 90+% of them, especially as you get more senior, end up being behavioral. So when you said like elicit these emotions and get into the notes, what's like the layer deeper? How do I do that?
Awesome. So eliciting emotions, that just comes down to one thing: drama. You got to have drama in your stories. It's like a good movie, right? Like if the movie script was boy meet girls, a boy meet girl, boy meet girls might be more interesting, but boy meet girls or boy meets boy, both are handsome, doing very well in their career, their families get together, they get married, the kids are very happy, everyone's happy. That'd be the worst movie in the world and nobody would ever watch it. But now if there's a villain, there's drama, there's tension, there's something happening. Okay, that's a movie I want to see. So you got to draw out what was the villain in this particular scenario, and what was unique about what you did. How were you the hero, or your team was the hero in drawing it out? And interestingly, it's often we have this bias of if we do something well, we just assume that everybody else does it well. And so that's why having a third party, like even when I prepared for my interview, I didn't have these coaching services, no coaches, but I had somebody else just like listen to me and be like, oh, that seems unique. Like go further into it. And I learned a lot from that. So you got to draw out those pieces quite a bit. And then, of course, how you talk about it really matters. Akash, this is like one of those things. I have my voice now is very different from my voice 4 years ago. I've done singing lessons and everything to change my voice, not because I want to have a second Elizabeth Holmes kind of moment, but because I actually struggled to speak for long times without my throat hurting, and I was just producing voice wrong. So actually, you can change it, and people can learn those skill sets. Oh, and then there's one more thing. If I didn't say it, that would be the biggest miss is the level of confidence or mindset or performance psychology that you go in with and you prep with has as much to do with the interview as anything else. You could tell the exact same story, and it leaves a very different emotion than what you leave with. And then your second question was optimizing for the notes. That's very much a structure thing. You say, then I did three things. Number one, and that's exactly a cue. Please take this note. Or like, and then you have what we call pre-frames, which is you're like, and then this was quite interesting. And now you draw the interviewer back and they note that down. And so you're using all these tricks to draw their attention to different parts of the story as well.
Okay, so we've told them to focus on behavioral, but when I work with folks, technical and case interview are where they end up spending all their time. So what are the things that they overlook or they're doing wrong in that time that they're spending?
In case interview specifically, I think people are stuck in one mode of preparation, and that's where they get it wrong. They are like, cool, I'll do a mock interview. Awesome. Then I'll do a second mock interview. I get feedback. I'll do a third mock interview. Between those mock interviews, you could review your feedback. You could write an ideal answer. You could do written exercises. You could do brainstorming exercises. There's 10 different ways you can improve. Ultimately, what you're improving is product thinking. It's not that you're trying to like just nail the interview aspect of it only. And so that I think that's the fundamental mistake is just giving, essentially you're using one pathway in your brain to improve while you could be probably using 10 different pathways. And where I've seen people make a lot of improvement really quickly, they just use all different pathways and now suddenly they're so much better. They're even listening to content like your podcast or Ben Thompson, those sort of things. Like all of those really help get you to that level.
Okay. For someone struggling to land interviews, what's the most important thing they can change in their approach?
Well, they can change their resume, but I think the biggest one is for them to figure out how they're networking and how they're reaching out. And, can they set certain goals that every week, if I'm applying to 20 places, let's say, can I go into 5 places of high value with a referral or somebody advocating for me or, me having a path around all the other people who are applying? That's probably the single biggest factor in people landing interviews. And of course, the interesting thing is even in this market, people are getting approached for interviews. And so your LinkedIn does really matter. And LinkedIn also has a little bit of search engine optimization. I'll tell you a quick funny story on this. For a very short amount of time, Sam and I worked in recruiting as well. Sam is my co-founder in the program. And so we started to search for a company that acquired augmented reality folks. So, we set up our filters on LinkedIn. We start reaching out to people. There's some automation. And I'm getting all these people from Walmart apply, and they have zero augmented reality experience. And we were very confused. What's happening? Well, I was looking for AR, and they're all based in Bentonville, Arkansas, AR, and I was getting all the wrong people. But just showing like certain keywords really matter, even if they came in accidentally. So LinkedIn optimization, you got to do a little bit to get the right people in.
Yeah. So 2 follow-up questions on that. First, is dropping your resume cold without a referral dead? And 2, how do you optimize your LinkedIn?
It's not dead, but it's a numbers game. So, if you set up a funnel such that 20 you're trying to get to 20 places, well, referrals are time consuming. Networking is time consuming. So you optimize for the top companies and others you apply. My last student who went to Coinbase, he applied and next day he got a call from the recruiter. And in fact, he said he didn't even apply. His wife literally was like, I'm submitting your application. He was like, no, they would never take me. And he got it. we had the last conversation. I'm like, you owe a lot to your wife. But LinkedIn optimization, for me, it's all about the about section. That's all, and your headline. That's all that matters. You got to actually showcase a little bit of more personality in LinkedIn for it to work really well, and then have the right keywords in. You probably don't want to put as many details for each of those roles as you might on a resume, but still enough such that people know what your scope is. And then content is the second factor. Like, I feel product managers should just write content, and there's many ways of getting good at content as well. But that's like sort of extra bonus points rather than the main thing.
Okay. What are the right and wrong ways to show personality on your LinkedIn?
I'll just say one thing here is to write as you would speak, not as you would, accomplished product manager with X years or something. It's like, hey, I love solving these problems. I love 0 to 1. Here's what I've done it before. That's how you relate to it, and showcase a little bit of like, oh, I love cats and whatever, something interesting as well.
And are there any downsides to content? The most common criticism of writing content is that a lot of content creators get laid off. If you look at the most prominent content creators, many of them have gone through a layoff. And then the other criticism you tend to hear of content is, the best operators are just heads down on their job.
Yeah, I think that's a cop-out, that the best ones are heads down in their job. No, like they're sharing some additional thoughts. I don't have any data that suggests that top content. So okay, my belief is that your content and your performance in your current job, it doesn't help necessarily. So you might still get laid off, or you might get laid off because in a long group, but like it doesn't help necessarily with the current role, but it will help you with the next role. And then it's one of those other ways of building up those product thinking skills. Like, if you are trying to, let's say, get known for AI, ML product management, which everybody is right now. Okay, show me examples of 5 products, their unique insights that got them to be so awesome. Write about those rather than, you can always showcase those things. So I think it's a myth that content creators will get laid off anymore. But I'll also give you my example. I was publishing so much content on LinkedIn. When I told my boss that I was leaving, I thought she would be like, hey, okay, I get it. You've been working on this. She was like, I'm shocked. I thought this is something you do, something you write content. You do some courses on the side. I never thought you would leave this. You're doing so well. But I don't think content creators get laid off any more than anyone else.
Okay. So you've coached thousands of PMs at this point to land jobs and grow their careers. Is there one universal piece of advice you would give all of them? And if so, what would it be?
Okay. So my universal advice is always your psychology matters as much as your strategy. You gotta own the identity of the person who's at the level that you want to get to right now. Seems very counterintuitive to most people, but if you can do that and really come from a place of success is inevitable, this is just happening, the pathway changes. Because see, most of the things we do in life, they're not actually hard. They're not physically hard. It's just that we are fighting with ourselves all the time. And so if you can just reduce the amount of fighting you're going to do with yourself, everything becomes easier. Not easy, but easier. That's the universal advice.
What's the most overrated advice you hear in the PM space today?
Probably 2 things. One is you got to be very technical. And second, you got to listen to your customer. The nuances behind that is you got to be as technical as your customer. So if you're building for engineers, you better be technical. If you're not, okay, you can afford to be a little less technical. So map the right level. And then listening to customers, I think, is fundamentally flawed, just in the perspective of people listen to customers as customer requests rather than understanding the underlying problem. It should always be customer owns the problem, I own the solution. And they don't get to do that, and you don't get to dictate their problems. So that's another overrated piece of advice.
Is there a trend in product management that you think is fundamentally flawed?
Not necessarily a trend, but I've seen a sense of we've reached peak PM level and it's all downhill from here. Seen many threads on that, and I don't believe that. I believe that layoffs will continue. This is just a fact of life for the next couple of years, but there is more and more capacity that is being built to advance with AI helping engineers and designers. Recently spoke to Ravi Mehta and he was saying a very similar thing. And so I think actually like there'll be more product managers opportunities being created. So that's just one thing I believe counter to many folks on the market. But I do believe that the ones with the right kind of skill sets will succeed, and those folks who are much more like program focused rather than product focused would either need to pivot, build up their skill sets, or go to a different role. And there's going to be other roles available.
Name a product manager you've learned the most from in your career and why.
I would probably say my one of my early mentors. His name is Samuel Clements. He I literally reached out to him. He was VP of product at HubSpot, then a bunch of other companies. He was like, "Oh, come, let's chat," and I'll pay for dinner. Just talk to me, and we had many conversations. Now he then went to venture capital. Then he's started his own company. I learned from him because he was just willing to listen and give very strong opinions, likely held. I remember my worst career experience was at a consulting company, which was trying to build a product. And he was like, "Oh, well, it has never yet worked, but let me know if it does." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, the cultures are so different. This is not going to work. I can tell you that." I was like, no, I'll make it work. And 6 months later, I was interviewing for a job with him. So that was the person who I got influenced with the most.
Okay. Now I want to move to advice for aspiring product leaders. If you had to teach a crash course for aspiring product leaders, your senior and your lead PMs, maybe some principles, what would be the first 3 lessons?
Number one, how to become best friends with your manager and your tech lead. Number 2 would be how to shape your psychology. And number 3 would be how to become a communication ninja. That'd be the first 3.
And how do you do that as a leader in terms of becoming a communication ninja?
I mentioned earlier about communication. For me, it's about knowing those specific situations where you need to come out ahead. But then the other thing is you need to consistently be, I know people say over communicating and they over communicate this message, but you got to share really things that are happening without waiting for a major launch. So one of the best things my group at Google used to do was to share customer learnings. And that's already an indicator of progress. If you are learning from customers and moving forward and everything, that is just fundamentally helpful. So your consistency of communication, even when people don't seem to pay attention, and you can experiment. I experimented by certain updates, I just stopped sending them. And then people are like, "Oh, I haven't seen that for 2 weeks." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. People are missing them. I'll start sending them again." So those are the kind of things that you really got to do to become a ninja communicator. And then it's always a work in progress, right? Nobody's a perfect communicator.
Okay. And then how do you win over your manager and tech leads?
So, from a manager perspective, I think the courage to have open-ended conversations on what's important for them is what ultimately helps you succeed. And, if you make the assumption that for you to grow and get promoted, your manager needs to grow and get promoted, and you put your effort behind actually helping them and helping them move their top initiatives and everything forward while doing really good work on the stuff that you're assigned, certainly your relationship will become good. And you'll know this when they are working on strategy at their level and you're the first person that they run it by you. Like, but I knew it. Like, I knew when I was not the person, I got to know about it last, and when I got to know it first. With tech leads, um, I remember a talk somebody did on different engineer personas. You really got to figure out who they are. Are they the kind of engineer who's very product focused? Okay, you use different approaches. Are they just like process focused? Okay, well, then you have a different kind of interaction with them. So again, it comes down to knowing them and also establishing norms pretty quickly. What are you responsible for? What am I responsible for? And look, I would also be remiss if I didn't say that it doesn't always work. So sometimes you just got to find when it's not a fit and figure out if you can switch to another thing. Sometimes the relationships are not going to work out, and that's okay. It happens.
That point around being your manager's go-to for strategy, I think is really, really important because a manager's job in building a strategy can be pretty lonely if their PMs can't rise to the level of being strategic. But having managed a lot of people in my past, I did find that a lot of PMs couldn't manage to rise to that level. So what is inhibiting them? And if the listener is one of those PMs who their manager isn't coming for strategic advice for, how can they become that?
So first of all, I think ultimately it just comes down to how well are you doing in the work that you've been assigned. You know, like in your scope of ownership, are you exhibiting the right kind of skill sets? Second is the openness. And then at some point, and you've got to be a judge of that, when you join a company, you have to have an opinion on things that go beyond your scope. And you need to be able to express it, even if it's feedback for other product managers or ideas for them, you need to be able to express it without them feeling attacked and them feeling defensive. If you can do that, you then start to automatically become that person who your manager is going to look up to. But like, I think sometimes what the fundamental thing and flaw that people have is that they try to do all these extra things, but their core is not good. And when your core is the strongest, then it enables all these other things relatively easily.
Yeah, if you're not succeeding in your current work, don't start going above and beyond. Going back to our initial lesson, you've got to focus on small thing or a small number of things that are really big instead of a large number of things which are really small. How can a PM position themselves for a promotion or leadership role if they feel stuck? I've heard this a lot where, oh, I'm the most senior IC PM, but they hired somebody above me.
Yeah. Well, help them get promoted. Just figure out what it would need for them to get to the next level. And, while this is excellent, like there is a scope beyond this where it's possible that the company is just not growing. Like so much of this is like, are you part of a company that's growing or a part of a group that's growing? If it's not, that might also be a conversation for you to think about. Should I go find something else? In my mind, it's always like, if you're on a rocket ship, you're going to get somewhere and you got to make the decision when it's for you. But also the other concept that applies is maybe you don't want to go somewhere. So like my last year at Google, I was very much like, I don't want any scope because I'm working on this program. And so like, how do I minimize the amount of work I need to do to still do a good job without increasing my scope? You could go through different phases in your career. It's absolutely fine to be on a high growth path, and it's absolutely fine to be on a my life is awesome path, and I don't need to change anything. There is no peer pressure should be involved here.
Looking back on your own career, what do you wish someone had told you when you first started out?
Simple. Product management is very different at every company. Understand what good looks like there rather than following all the books. Everything does not operate in the ideal Marty Kagan way. Marty's awesome, but he also illustrates all the cases where things were not working. And so you have to figure out what good looks like there and just work towards that.
Awesome. We'll end it there. Thank you for this wide-ranging conversation on how to succeed as a PM, how to succeed as a leader, how to get a PM job. If listeners want to learn more, where can they find you online?
3 places: LinkedIn, primary one, my YouTube channel at Intentional Product Manager, and then, of course, website intentionalproductmanager.com.
All right, Shobhit, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Aakash. This was my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find out about the podcast. You can find all the past episodes or learn more about the show at product-growth.com. See you in the next episode.